Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you as part of our career conversation on financing consulting. Financing consulting is always, I mean, it's very general terms, of course, but the different industry sectors are very popular among IS graduates. So I know that this will be a popular session to watch, and that you'll probably get people reaching out to you afterwards. And in advance, I'd like to thank you for your willingness to be mentors and also to share your experience with us. My name is Eric Owens. I'm the director of the IS program, and I'll be your host this evening. So I think we had talked about opening up with maybe 5 or 6 minutes of opening remarks about your career path and about your current position, and about looking back at Boston College, trying to share some wisdom with us about what you've learned along the way. So why don't we start with that, and then when we have time at the end, we'll move on to other questions as well. Lindsay was the first to log in, and she's in pole position on my Zoom screen here. So why don't you start us off? Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated in 2018 as an international studies major with my concentration in ethics and international social justice. My cluster was international institutions, and I had a minor in women's and gender studies. Now I've been working at AEW Capital Management. It's in Boston. That's their headquarters, but they also have offices in LA. They have a bunch of offices in Asia and Europe as well. And so I've been there since I graduated, since I started in August, but I didn't have a job when I graduated, so don't stress out too much. I had been applying for jobs even like the summer going into senior year, so it can really take some time. I got my job offer in July, actually, beginning of July, and I actually was an intern for the first 6 months that I was working at AEW. And it was kind of the intention that I would get hired eventually, but it was a good way for me to like still get paid, still get some experience, and then I was able to start working there. I work in research. I'm an analyst, and so we're a real estate investment manager. We buy real estate, whether it's industrial, office buildings, large apartment buildings, or like retail centers. And I work in research, and so my focus is on economic forecasting. I look at our US assets, whatever cities we're working in. And so my path to get into real estate was kind of unexpected for me because I was an international studies major. I did an internship in international development summer after my freshman year. But the things that drew me to finance and real estate were the same things that drew me to international studies. I love economics and politics, and I thought that working in investment management was a really good blend of that. And so I did an internship program at BC through the Corcoran Center, and I started working there on campus doing research in real estate. And I did an internship at Madison Park Development Corporation in Boston. And that was kind of how I got my draw into this, my career path. But I didn't know that this is what I was going to end up doing when I started out. And some advice that I have for seniors who are graduating now, or anyone who's like looking to get an internship or a job in finance, is connecting with alumni is really big. When I was a senior, I started going to events, whether that was through the Real Estate Council at BC. They have a really great alumni network, and both Boston and New York have a lot of BC alumni. I would go on LinkedIn, I would look at companies that I wanted to work for, and I would search for BC alumni who work there, and I would message them on LinkedIn and say, hi, like I'm interested in going into finance, and I went to BC, I'm a senior, and I have questions about how you got started and if you have any advice for me. I always tried to keep it like casual and like friendly, and it was never like I need to find a job.
We've you're paused for us, Lindsay. We'll wait a second to see if you can catch up. The internet got excited about the story here and made a hiccup.
Because a professor had.
There we go. Wait, Lindsay, you skipped a bit there. It froze for us. You were saying that you were casual and not too intense when you were reaching out to alumni.
Yeah. So that was actually, sorry, it froze. That's actually how I did end up getting my job. Is a professor at BC had recommended that I check out this company, and he connected me to an alum he knew who worked there. I'd actually already talked to 2 alumni who were working there, so I was already like blazing to go, like ready to talk to them. But I did so many calls with alumni senior year, and there was not a single job that I got an interview for that I didn't connect with someone ahead of time and have them pull my resume to be looked at by HR. So that's like my #1 tip. I would never apply to anything cold. You always have to try and find a connection.
Terrific. Thank you. That's really helpful, and a good encouragement as well for students to really start reaching out immediately, and don't make it a big deal, because as you know, as alumni who are offering to help, it's not a huge deal as long as people are respectful and open-minded about when they reach out. So Kevin, do you mind going next?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Kevin Moran, Marshall Moran now. Actually, I got married last year, and I graduated from BC in 2011. I was international studies with a concentration in economics, and from there I moved to Charles River Associates full-time after graduating. I worked, which is a consulting firm, it's a small consulting firm, headquartered in Boston, I think with a pretty substantial BC connection. And I worked there for 5 years, focusing mostly on international arbitration valuation work. So kind of an interesting blend of law and finance. Kind of that experience culminated with 2 World Bank arbitration cases between the government of Venezuela and some gold mining concerns that had invested in Venezuelan natural resources. Really an interesting job for me. It kind of blended, you know, some of the poli-sci, law, international studies curricula, along with you know, more traditional finance valuation work. Coming out of that, I kind of wanted to move to something a little bit more markets-facing, finance-facing. So I went to business school at the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School, and studied finance and real estate there. And so I too am a IS person who's moved to real estate, and I'm now at Morgan Stanley in the real estate group within the investment bank, doing M&A advisory, capital raising, and strategic kind of advisory for public and private real estate firms globally, with a focus in the U.S., but we do a lot of cross-border stuff. So I guess I'm hitting both finance and consulting here, and can speak to both certainly. But I would echo kind of what Lindsay said about networking. I think, you know, even coming out of business school, where there's a very formal recruiting pathway, especially into kind of the big investment banks, I think developing personal connections and getting insight into the recruiting process, firm culture, and kind of developing a rapport with someone on the other side is a key, no matter, you know, if you're recruiting for a startup that has, you know, 10 employees, or a bulge bracket investment bank that has 20,000 employees.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. That's really helpful and interesting. We've got, we'll see how the real estate trend develops over time here on our panel. Catherine, do you mind going next? We still can't hear you. We got to unmute. I can do it for you. There you go. No, there you go. You're good.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, now we're good.
Oh, perfect. I do this every day. You'd think like after the 1,000th Zoom call, you'd remember. But hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Kraybeck. I was also a 2018 grad. I was international studies and econ. And now I work at Deloitte Consulting. Most of what I do is in the healthcare life science space. I've actually moved almost entirely into research and development in life sciences. So I've done everything from a strategy and a roadmap for the quality organization within research and development, to leading a transformation of like, I think over 1,000 people for clinical studies and development. So anywhere from drug discovery to go-to-market. And then I've also done some work in healthcare and hospitals. So my path to Deloitte is kind of weird and wonky. I grew up in Beijing, so I always had this interest in international studies. And when I came to BC, pretty much that's what led me into IS. But at the beginning, I had this vision of myself in the FBI or the CIA. And then that got pretty much almost immediately freshman year thrown around because I realized I probably couldn't ever get a security clearance. So I spent my next summer being an orientation leader and kind of just finding myself and trying to figure out what I want to do in life. And right after I was an orientation leader, a previous orientation leader came to campus and was talking to all of us and told us, if you like, you know, interacting with people and you like helping people out through change and things like that, consulting is like the perfect thing to go into. And then one other thing, I was a research assistant for Professor Krauss during that summer, and I had figured out that I probably didn't want to do straight research after college. I really needed people interaction. So it's like, all right, this sounds perfect for me. So I interned with Deloitte and then went back full time. One piece of advice I would give is like anything can be turned into a strength if you know how to like weave it into your story. So I remember at first thinking that I was at a disadvantage because I wasn't finance or anything business related when I was going for these jobs. But then I actually used that orientation leader example as something in my interview as like, this is how my skills can help what you guys do. So turning everything you do and then being able to give a perspective on why it's valuable and why it's specifically valuable to that job is something that will really help out.
Great, thanks so much. And where are you based now, Catherine?
I'm based in Boston, but we travel a lot for our job. Not right now, but in general.
Yeah, of course, no problem. Great, thanks so much. Dan, you're next on my clockwise Zoom panel here. Why don't you go next?
Sure, thanks. I'm Dan Fognafushi. I was class of 2014 at a political science concentration and a minor in history. And I'm currently studying for my MBA at Georgetown, McDonough School of Business. I'm going to be working as a summer MBA associate with Cognizant Consulting in their change management practice, starting in June, so in just a couple of weeks. So I very recently went through the MBA application process, and I very recently went through the consulting recruiting process, which it has some quirks to it. So if there's any questions about that, I think I can ask or answer those. So after BC, I worked for a company called AIFS, is American Institute for Foreign Study, which is a very lofty name, but basically the company just did cultural exchange programs. So if you've ever studied abroad, it would have been through a similar company like that. What I did specifically was work for Camp America, which was sponsor J1 visas for staff from abroad to come to the US. We kind of did sales during the winter, and then over the summer, it was crisis response and kind of human resources and that sort of thing, and working with kind of the cultural quirks of bringing staff from abroad to the US. So it was a really interesting job, got to travel a little bit for hiring events abroad, and that was a really cool experience. I think it's good to look into travel-oriented companies because they kind of get it. They understand if you like to travel, they'll support that and help you really take advantage of those opportunities. So after doing that for about 5 years, I kind of decided I wanted to pivot, wasn't sure what direction to go. So I thought about the things that I enjoyed about my job. I really liked client-facing work. I liked getting into client site and kind of helping them solve their problems and kind of getting my hands dirty in that way and getting out of the office and traveling. So consulting seemed like a good way to combine those, and I looked into getting an MBA because it is a pathway into consulting through the kind of recruitment process and those sorts of things that's kind of standardized. For me, it made sense to look into Georgetown because I wanted to live in DC. I thought it would give me the types of opportunities and exposure to the right type of companies that I was looking for. And it's a great program. It's intentionally globally focused. So we talk about things that big multinational firms deal with, like trade or supply chain, human resources issues that are kind of specific to firms that do business across borders. And hopefully I'll next year, seeing how things go, get to go abroad and do a consulting project with some of my colleagues. A couple of words of advice, not to beat a dead horse with the networking thing, but it's really important. And it's really important to talk to as many people as possible, have conversations. You won't know what pathways are available unless you talk to people, because there's literally millions of opportunities. And so you have to talk to people, get an idea of what they're doing. And through that process, it'll help you hone your own story and get an idea of what you're actually looking for. You'll start asking the right questions and start kind of driving yourself towards your own goals. And the other thing is to really be intentional with your personal development. I think a lot of people, when they get their first job out of undergrad, it's maybe not what they want to do for the rest of their life, and that's okay. What you want to do is make it work for you, because you're going to be working really hard for them. You want to make the opportunity work for you, and see how you can help yourself grow and create a personal story for yourself, and see what you can add to your toolbox. Try to learn some tools of the trade as well, and see kind of how you can improve yourself going forward.
Great, that's really helpful. We'll circle back to a number of these themes that you guys are raising for sure. So Seamus, why don't you give us your story?
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Seamus O'Rourke. I'm a BC 2006 grad. So I didn't do the math, but I think I'm probably close to as many years after graduation as everyone else here combined, or close anyway. But I was an international studies major with an economics focus. Eventually, I actually came to BC as an early education major. And then switched over from the Lynch School to A&S as a philosophy major for a short period of time, because they make you choose a major when you switch schools. And then I saw the International Studies program, which at the time, and maybe still, you had to apply to get into, and I was always studied foreign languages, speaking, I minored in French eventually, was very interested in it. So I went into that major, like I said, with the economics focus. And then by the time I was a senior, had kind of evolved to thinking that I probably wanted to go into a business or finance type of role after college. So I started to pick up some business school. They were really, or business college, some really entry-level business classes. Alongside that, I did like financial accounting my senior year, just a couple of things to add to the resume. So when I graduated, I got a job at General Electric in Stamford, Connecticut. They have a rotational finance program, analyst program in their energy financial services business. So that was the first job that I took. And it was really a good opportunity, kind of front office finance on the deal team of GE, which does energy lending and tax structuring, and they own, buy and sell, assets. So that's what I did for 2 years. The first year, I was actually in their international portfolio group, which was great and somewhat cohesive with the international studies major. So we managed mostly power plants, pipelines, but some energy assets in Pakistan and in the Philippines and in Senegal. And I actually got to travel to Senegal like 3 times in the first year that I was out of college, which was very cool, as we managed a natural gas plant outside of Dakar in Senegal. It was a rotational program, though. It's standard at some of these bigger companies. And I'll make one of my advice comments in passing here. I do think an opportunity at a big company early in your career can be helpful. I think it was for me to go to General Electric. You get to have a lot of resources for training, good name recognition. So that's definitely a good opportunity. But I rotated after a year into their renewables group, doing wind and solar primarily, but any of their renewable investing. And that is almost the end of the story. So I did that for a year, and then my boss at GE went over to a private equity portfolio company called Terragen, which is a kind of a pure play renewable owner, operator, developer. And so he hired me across there. I've been there since 2008. Again, in I'd say kind of a hardcore finance role. Despite being an international studies major, not a business major, that's sort of the role that I've ended up in. Along the way, I went to NYU and got an MBA. And I did that part-time, which is something a little different. I think most people probably go and do a full-time business school, either as a pivot in their career or because they're switching jobs. For me, I did it part-time, continued at the same company. And so that's what I still do today, based in Midtown Manhattan. And I'll stop there and get us into the next part of the discussion.
Okay, great. I think it's really important for our students to recognize that, first of all, as I think Dan said, there's millions of pathways out of the major at BC, and that IS majors continue to draw upon the work you did on campus to build into all these different professions. It doesn't mean that you need to actually focus on a particular field like finance in order to have a successful career in finance downstream. One of the things we talk to our students about is the importance of the interdisciplinary work that the program forces you into. So you're doing econ and history and political science and some ethics and things like that along the way that, can come in handy when you end up emphasizing one or more of those downstream. So I guess I wanted to start by asking any or all of you, what are some of the things you did at Boston College, or especially courses that you took, but maybe also other programs that you feel have been especially beneficial to where you are now? Catherine mentioned orientation leadership, and that's one excellent thing. Are there others as well that you look back to, like I said, courses or programs or experiences at Boston College that were important to you that might also be important to our students as they look forward? And anyone can jump in.
I can go. I can't remember specific names of courses at this point, but I think it is an interesting worldview that you develop through the IS program, and a way to approach cultural differences and just analyze things in a way that maybe other people don't have the same level of exposure to, and you don't necessarily know that you have that set of skills until you go out into the working world and see how other people's approach kind of cultural differences in a way that isn't, just isn't as skillful as maybe you'll be prepared to. So I think that's a useful skill that I personally developed from the IS program.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, this might be an unpopular thing to say, but I wrote a Scholar of the College thesis my senior year. And aside from the actual subject matter of the thesis, I think it was kind of instrumental in developing the skills for self-direction and self-discipline and kind of independent research, along with figuring out how to translate having an idea about something and putting it on paper and doing the necessary research to explain it to people who don't maybe have the same understanding of that idea that you do. I find that, throughout my career that the skills that I developed while doing that, basically how to communicate a complex thing in a simple way, is extraordinarily important, kind of no matter what you're doing. So I think that kind of both the soft and the hard skills learned throughout that process that I undertook my whole senior year have been very instrumental.
Yeah, and Kevin, I think that's a good point. There's probably two prongs to that question. One might be more relevant to an undergrad of, how to use the remaining time at BC and, certain programs. But to focus on someone who's a senior and is kind of wrapping up or even, wrapped up and looking for a job now, graduating. I think, Kevin, that's a good point in that one thing I would say as you're looking for a job is, particularly since this is the finance and consulting forum, is you're probably competing against a lot of people with maybe a more straightforward business undergrad degree. And I would say that matters very little for entry-level jobs from what I can tell. I think people ultimately want to hire someone they like and plan to work with and spend the day with. But I think they also want someone who they think can learn a job, because no one comes out of college really other than nurses and accountants and, people with that kind of a skill. Knowing how to do their job, they're going to learn that. So I think they want someone who they think is going to learn and do a good job. So I would say that taking what you did like from your coursework or even from your extracurriculars and what you thought you were good at and what you learned and making that, your strength and making that what you rely on rather than trying to stretch something to kind of check a box that you think might need to be checked. You might do yourself a disservice by not kind of focusing on what you think your strengths are. And I think the international studies major is going to give you plenty of opportunities for that. I mean, even, I wasn't in more of the political science focus, but it's multidisciplinary, Eric, as you said. And even just to have sort of a sophisticated view of how the world works because of your coursework, I think can be a real advantage as you present yourself in interviews.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks. Anybody else want to chip in on that? We can move on to other stuff if you want. Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
I could answer. So one of the things that I did while at BC that was really helpful for me was I actually worked at the Career Center as like a peer career advisor. And I learned that there are so many resources, like even when you're an alum, you can go and have your resume like edited, cover letters edited. They have great advice. And that's something like knowing how great those resources are is really key. And so even as you like go into the world, keep coming back to that. Another thing is like learning how to tailor and like pitch myself, even though, so I was international studies major, I wasn't even econ track. And so sometimes I was like, should I be insecure about this? But I found ways in my senior year. I took classes in the business school. I tailored like whatever paper I had, whether it was for my IS senior seminar, I tailored it into like a niche topic about like real estate and sustainability. And I was able to make it applicable to what I wanted to go into. So you can always like kind of shift it up. And when I had interviews, I had those things in mind. So I could talk about like this paper that I worked on or this project I had in the class that was really specific. And I said, I have these skills. I was able to pick these up really easily. And just showing you're like adaptable and ready to go for whatever the challenge is more important than any specific skill. I took a workshop senior year for some coding programs that I thought would be helpful for me. And I never used it on my job. I'm sure adding it on the resume, I guess, was a good idea. But I think showing that I could like learn things and was a good communicator, I had lots of experience with team projects, was way more helpful than those specific skills because they can teach those to you on the job.
Catherine, do you have anything you want to add? I didn't mean to stifle you by mentioning your orientation leadership. Anything else on your mind?
No, you're good. I would say actually the classes that made me read and write a lot were probably the most important out of all the ones I took. So your class, Professor Owens, what was it? Ethics, Religion, and International Politics gave me heartburn every week because of all the reading we had to do.
Yeah,
you're welcome. It taught, thank you, really, thank you. It taught me a lot of skills that I didn't realize it was teaching me at that point. So prioritization was a big one. We had, 200 to 300 pages of reading. So getting to what we needed to get to, things like that. And then also writing essays has been surprisingly really helpful. I don't really write anything anymore that often, but I spend all my days making slides. And it's kind of the same concept, right? You're telling a story, you have to have a thesis for why you're making it, a message that you're getting across. And just that skill of being able to distill information down into really pieces has helped me tremendously.
Great, yeah, thanks. There's a lot of different directions we can go to, and I'll circle back to a couple different things, but I wanted to make sure we talked about one of the more sort of famous / infamous and maybe intimidating aspects of moving into consulting and finance, and that's facing the interviewer. I wonder if you might talk a bit about your experience interviewing for the firm that you have, or any interview experience that you thought was noteworthy, that might shed some light or let students know what to expect, you know, beyond estimating the number of manhole covers in Bangalore. What else, or what was the experience like, or now that many of you are interviewing others for these positions as well, what do you look for along the way?
Yeah, I'll jump in there. I think, and the other MBAs back me up on this, I think, but one of the things that I did not do enough of in undergrad that I picked up in business school was like the practice interview or the case interview with peers that are going through the same process. I think, you know, just like anything else, or like Malcolm Gladwell says, you know, the more time you spend doing something, or the more reps that you get, the better you'll be. And you can't really replicate how you're going to react in the room when someone throws you like a curveball question that you hadn't really thought about or maybe hadn't prepared for. And so the best way to replicate that experience is, you know, practice interviewing with your friends or with classmates or whomever. And so I think that is like a key skill as you think about job interviews, for sure.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, totally agree. Spent a lot of time this last fall, maybe 50% or more of my time at school was actually on interview prep. So it does take up a lot of your time. The case interview, I think, is like this mythical, daunting thing, but it really just comes down to practice. There's several resources that I think are useful to start with. There's a few books that you can just buy and read to get a baseline. So one is Case in Point by Mark Cosentino, and then there's a couple of other authors. One is Victor Chang and one is David Orval. Those are good resources to just get started, and it'll tell you, you know, kind of like frameworks to start with, and then from there you like grow and like actually practice mock interviews, but that'll give you a good introduction.
That's super helpful. Yeah, go ahead, Seamus.
I won't belabor the point. You know, practice is good because I think you're going to be nervous, and I think you're going to be nervous no matter what. So the more you do it, the more, you know, chances you have to have a better interview. You'll have better and worse interviews, and that's fine. But practice is good. I would say to you know, be prepared. People can tell if you don't know what you should know. So look up about the company that you're going to see. If you can find out anything about the people you're going to talk to, that's great. Just be as prepared as is reasonable, because I think you need to show people that you're interested in the job, that you can follow through, that you're, you know, likely to perform. So that's a good one. Don't worry. I mean, I've been asked a couple of mean interview questions. The first one was when I interviewed at GE. Someone asked me what 99 times 101 was, and I was like, I don't know. And he said, all right, that's fine. I just wanted to see your wheel spin. And then I got hired for that job. And that guy who asked me that question was the guy who ended up bringing me to the company that I'm at now. So it's okay. You know, be honest, do your best, I think, is probably the best advice that I can give.
Yeah, I mean, how you respond to things obviously is part of the interview as well, not just whether an answer meets their expectations or fits the checks the box that might be expected, but your way of responding and processing and responding to uncertainty obviously is crucial as well.
Oh, and I'll throw one more thing in. Sorry to interrupt again, but this is kind of old school. I hope everyone does this, but at the end of interviews, I would send thank you notes. I've interviewed people, and sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And if you're on the margin, and you're considering a couple people, but there's someone who just seems really interested in the job, follows up. You don't have to pester them, just send, hey, I appreciated the time, that kind of thing. I actually think that that's probably a good discipline to use on interviews that you care about. If you go on the interview and you don't want the job, then fine.
Agree with that 100%.
Any others want to speak on this particular question of interviews before we move on?
I would say making sure you have questions so that way you can find out if you even want to work there. I know I had some priorities in working for a firm that would allow for professional development, mentorship opportunities, getting to see like other aspects of the firm besides just what my own department was doing. And so knowing what you want is just as important. I know like when I graduated and I didn't have a job until July, and I was so nervous, and I was like, I would take the first thing that I got if I could get anything, but I ended up holding out for something that I really liked, and I'm happy I did because I've been able to stay at this firm. It's been 2 years since graduation, and I know getting a few years under your belt is good. And so finding a place that you actually want to stay is like great if you can do that. I second the thank you note following up, like huge. When I go into interview, I always have multiple copies of my resume so I can give them to, if I end up meeting with more than one people. Sometimes you'll go in to meet with one person and you'll end up meeting with a few. So, and always get everyone's business cards. You can follow up with every single person that you meet with and say thank you, no matter who it is. Being really polite to whoever's checking you in, whether that's the receptionist or HR, because that can even make a difference if you come in and you think you're amazing or whatever, and you're not kind to the first two people you run into. So.
Okay, we lost you there, Lindsay, for a second, but it sounded like you were wrapping up. Catherine, do you want to add anything?
Yeah. I would also say just be likable. Make it into a conversation, not an interrogation. Like sometimes you get so nervous and are so intent on answering questions that they forget that like it's another person, another human that also has interests and things like that on the other side. And then to your point earlier about how interviews are sometimes about how people react, I think for case interviews, it's really easy to keep in mind that it's about testing, whether you can solve problems and things like that. But it's easy to forget that it's also about whether you're client ready or not. So if you don't know something, whether you freak out or whether, you can take a step back and say, you know what, I don't know that, like give me a couple of seconds, maybe I can figure it out, makes a big difference, because it makes the difference of whether like we can or can't put you in front of someone.
Great, thank you. These are all such helpful bits of advice. I'm also wondering about something that's related to interviewing, but is also more expansive than that. And that's about how you tell your story, your narrative. If you're Hamilton fans, you know that you wait till you die and then someone else writes your story, right? But for the rest of us, when we're presenting ourselves to others in every context, we have a sort of narrative, and college students, really like the rest of us, but college students are still figuring out what their trajectories are ahead of them. And it seems to me sometimes are overly quick to have a narrative of a certain sort. I've always dreamed of being in real estate finance. Everything I've done from age 7 until age 22 has been about real estate finance, and that's why I'm perfect for this job. And but on the other hand, of course, there's the I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just curious to know how many vacation weeks you offer, which are at the other end of the spectrum. So I wonder if you might reflect a bit on what it means to have a narrative, or to be putting those pieces together as you're not just in interviews, but in thinking about your own trajectory as a way of thinking about your career path, both in the rearview mirror and looking forward.
Well, I could start that one. I'll try to be brief with a couple of different ideas. So one is, I think that you have to know who you are and what you want to be doing when you go into an interview. You don't have to know it all. You can know what you don't know too. That's okay. But I think you have to have some sense of why you're there. which is that this is a job that would fit into the hole that's the person that you are. I think a BC grad, especially these days, is going to be a smart kid. People are going to know that. You know, you can reinforce that, and that's good. But I think if you come in with confidence and with a sense of what you know and are interested in and how this job fits with it, what you maybe don't know, that's okay. And then craft it into a story. For me, my story really was in the summers I did landscaping, so I didn't have internships, which at the time when I was graduating, we're kind of getting just over those few years into, it seemed like almost a requirement. And I was an international studies major, not a business major. So, but I turned it into the story. So I remember going in at GE and saying, look, this is what I do. I do landscaping in the summer. You know, that is a certain work ethic that I think that you're going to want. But you also probably want to make sure that I can do the finance work. And so, you know, here's some of the coursework that I've done, and here's what I've learned about the company, and here's why I'm interested in this job. Particularly with GE, for me, it was, I wanted to do a business type job, but I liked the tangible asset aspect of electricity, of power, which is something that I could, you know, make a part of that story. So I think you do want to be thoughtful in how the job interview that you're in front of fits in with the things that you want to do. Understanding that you don't have to have it all and shouldn't probably have it all. I'm sure, I don't know if any of us, I certainly still don't have it all. Maybe someday you have it all together. The other thing that I would say is, as an international studies major, I was an international studies major because I was really interested in that sort of work. Or maybe I shouldn't say work, that, you know, the international world, foreign languages, the combination of it all. That hasn't really ended up being what I do for work. It doesn't mean it's not still a part of what I do as a person. I'm trying to teach myself Spanish. I still speak French fairly well. I like to travel when I can. So I think, you know, you don't need to have compartments of, you know, this is what I do for work. And so it also has to be every part of who I am. It can be a part of who you are. So I think that, you know, bringing the interests that got you into international studies to your job interview can be as a person, and doesn't have to be as a, you know, this is specific information that's relevant to the role that I would be filling.
That's helpful. Thanks. Others? Anyone else?
I think it's good to kind of think about, for the job interview that you're going in for, think about what achievements they might be looking for and what in your history might be useful for the interviewer or interesting to the interviewer, and be specific to the opportunity. I think a lot of people just like have a set of achievements in their back pocket that they kind of bring to every interview, and it's better to probably think before the specific interview, you know, kind of be strategic and prepare and bring the set of achievements that will be most useful to that interviewer on that day.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll hop
That's
in.
great.
I think just like
Sure.
one, I think I'm not going to belabor the point. I think Seamus and Daniel, both of you make great points. I think just think about, you know, when you're thinking about your quote unquote story and what you're trying to present about yourself, what are 3 or 4 things that you want to highlight about your personality, about achievements you might have had, about your, you know, skills or capabilities? What are those 3 or 4 things you want to hit on, and what stories can you tell that highlight them? And I think if you're communicating about why you're a good fit for the job, and if you can highlight those things and do it in an impactful way, I think that's super helpful.
Thank you all.
I would also say, sorry, one last quick thing. Practice your story, and don't just do it with people who you're really close with. Maybe do it with someone who doesn't know you as well, because something that makes sense and that connects in your head might not necessarily connect for other people, or something that really makes sense for someone that's really, really close to you because they already know you and know like things that you've done might make sense, but might not make sense to someone who's never met you before.
Really thoughtful points there. Thank you, everybody. I thought we might wrap up in the last 10 minutes or so that we have by reflecting a bit on one thing that at least as BC alums and as a faculty member there, we usually feel is pretty special about Boston College, and it's the sort of ethos of the place, the spirit of that connects service to others, but also just a broad sense of ethical values and reflection that's a part of our IS program, but also the university at large. And I wonder if you all might take a minute to reflect on the values that you have and how they relate to the work that you're doing. Do you find strength in the correspondence between them? Do you find that they challenge one another, your personal values in your working life, or what are some moments of clarity that you've had over time in regard to the relationship between your values and your professional life? As an ethics professor, I'm contractually obliged to ask that question.
It's a great question. I'll go first because I don't think it's easy to go first. That's a big question, but that's the type of question that I would expect, honestly. I think that we do, have to hold ourselves to a high standard as BC alumni. So yeah, I feel very strongly that I think the values that BC tries to instill or represents are good ones that have been helpful to me, and that can apply career-wise too. So like I mentioned, I've gotten into renewable energy really by chance, but I've stayed in it. And so there's the kind of social or really, environmental good that is doing. And so that's nice. So that's one thing that I feel like to be able to be proud of the type of work that your company is doing is a luxury, perhaps, but it's something that I value. Again, there's probably a lot that could be said here, but the only other thing that I will say is, since this is a finance and consulting forum, so to try to be kind of responsive to that I think that finance and consulting is a fast-paced environment, and I think that it's one where there's a lot of money, a lot of competition, and can some of the environments that exist around it and in it can be a little worldly in a way that BC values might be a little different too. And I've found that if you have a sense of who you are, and I've tried to, and if you try to be true to that in all the environments that you're placed in, that over the long run, that actually you get a lot of respect for that. People see you, can see you as sort of a conscientious voice, as someone that brings positivity to a work environment, to a project, and that ultimately that's actually of value. It's not just that it's good in and of itself, but that it's of value to the culture that you're working in, to the success of your company. So I would encourage anyone out there to be true to yourself and to take the values that you found most positive from BC, and to try to keep them with you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
That's
I think
great.
I'll piggyback on that a little bit. I think I totally agree with that. I think there's whether or not you're in the Peace Corps or working in more finance and consulting, I think there are ways to go about your business life, as it were, that are honorable, with integrity, with Jesuit values at the fore or not, and what shape that takes can kind of be a personal choice. But I know for me, I think it's taken on kind of a mentorship role for others, and I think that's I was fortunate that a lot of people kind of took me under their wing or gave me an extra 5 minutes to give me advice or whatnot, and I've tried to take as much time as I can to do that for BC folks or people from business school or whomever. I mean, even analysts that I work with today that are, recent graduates, I think making time to give back in whatever way you can, whether it's, community service or helping people kind of think about their own career is kind of living the values that BC has instilled. So I think that for me, it's been making time for things like that.
Yeah, totally second all of those points by both Kevin and Seamus. I think it's important when you go into a client-facing role to try to understand where they're coming from and what their needs are. And empathy can be incredibly important. And not just the direct client, it might be the people they work with or the people that they work for. And trying to understand all of the different perspectives, I think, is something that we learn about at BC, and it's incredibly difficult to do and something you have to continue working hard on, but it will make you more useful in a client-focused role if you really are truly trying to do what's best and try to weigh all the possible perspectives.
Yeah, and I feel like one thing I try to do is both incorporate like my ethical viewpoint in my work life, but also in my after work life. So at work, I got involved with our ESG committee, which focuses on like environmental changes and social changes and government involvement, like on site of the real estate that we own. But also out of work, I have been running like half marathons to fundraise for charities that I'm passionate about. There's a nonprofit, an international development nonprofit that I interned with during college that I'm still really involved with. And I've been like doing a ton of work with them outside of my day-to-day and my office. And doing that has given me, I feel like, a lot of purpose. And especially in like times like these where like I don't get to go into the office every day, I'm still having kind of social interactions with those nonprofits that I'm involved in and still getting kind of that feeling like I can do something in the world is really important. So finding that outlet like outside of work, and that's also like another place like meet people. I know a lot of you might move to a new city after you graduate, and you'll want to make friends at work, but you also want to make some friends outside of work, and getting involved is a really great way to do that.
And for me, I'm pretty lucky that Deloitte really lets you choose the type of work you want to do. Whether it's initiatives, it's kind of like extracurriculars that we do for work, or in terms of projects. So like giving back for me and men and women for others, for me meant doing work in an industry that I feel like I can almost visualize tangible benefits from it. And that's why I've stuck mainly to healthcare and life sciences. And then also, like I do a lot of recruiting. And part of that is because I want to go back and help BC students where I can, because someone at one point did that for me as well.
That's really great. I had one last question, and really it's directed for Catherine and Lindsay. Boston College International Studies program is predominantly women, and it has been for quite a while. And the finance industry in particular is largely dominated by, male voices or male bodies. But I don't know if that's true with consulting. I don't have any numbers, but I wonder if both you women might say a word about gender and your workplace and your experience coming through the IS program and into the workplace, whether you have some lessons learned or some anything you might want to share with the women in our program about moving into the careers that you've chosen.
Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
Up to you.
Okay. I mean, I would say like being in finance, not even just particular to one firm, but I notice even at networking events, conferences, that rooms are most often male and white. And I think that's a real problem in finance in general. And I think asking questions, I mean, maybe not like once you're working at a company, trying to bring that up and try and see if there is some kind of like mentorship program for like women at your firm. And even if your firm is too small to have something like that, trying to
let it catch up for a second. I can edit these little gaps out of our recording. So
Our firm, is it
wait,
freezing
Lindsay,
again?
we lost you for a second.
No, okay.
It's okay. We could, like I said, I'll edit out the clip where there's a gap here and there. But
okay.
You were talking about within the firm reaching out to. Mm-hmm.
My supervisor is really fantastic. She's always gathering up the women around us and asking us to go grab coffee just to check in. And I feel really lucky, but trying to seek out a network like that is helpful. And also trying to give a leg up to anyone else. So if people are reaching out to you on LinkedIn, if alumni, other, younger alumni than you are reaching out and asking for job advice, trying to give them a leg up is really important too.
Great. Catherine?
Yeah, I think mentorship is really important because you have to be able to see yourself, a couple of years in the future and what that looks like for you and whether there's a pathway there. And then another thing I would say is really important is to see if there are any habits that you have. I know for me is sometimes I wait to speak up in meetings and things like that. And that's something I've specifically worked on. And that's something like I've talked with other, analysts and consultants on how to have a bigger presence, especially sometimes when it's not the internal, that's not your internal company that's the issue, but it's just, externally, some of your clients might be international and have different cultural standards and things like that. And that has really helped for me. It also doesn't help being young. So the more you can also have like a bigger voice and get comfortable with your voice mattering is good.
And if I can throw in, if you don't mind, I would just say to the BC women, you are so welcome and so needed. So just be confident, be yourself. I really have seen, I've been in the workplace for 15 years or so. The world is changing. It is, I would imagine, I can only imagine, intimidating. There are a lot of male bodies and voices, but it is really changing. And you are so welcome and needed. So do come and be confident.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my wife works in tech consulting, or has in the past. She's in the academy now, and yeah, it's an experience that is constant on people's mind and affects jobs of every type consistently all the time. And so I didn't want to fail to raise the issue as a starting point. And I know that all of you would be interested in following up with students who have questions about these or other matters. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. When I sent out that email a week or two ago, 2 weeks ago, I guess, there were like 125 alumni within a day and a half who had reached out to say that they were eager to meet with students. And that's emblematic of a sense of continuity and care for one another that we have in the IS program, and that you all in particular have. And I want to thank you for that. It matters a great deal to our current students. You continue to make us faculty proud. You really are terrific. And we appreciate the work you're doing out there. So thank you for joining us tonight. And we look forward to more of these panels in the future. We'll be doing, as I mentioned, a few more focused panels on themes or sub-industries or things like that in the coming year to make sure that we're cataloging a sort of library for students. This is an occasion where the downsides of the pandemic also open up opportunities to do more things online that can be distributed more widely, and we want to take advantage of that. So thank you guys for being here tonight, and take care of each other and stay safe. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for putting it together.
Thanks.